It is 7:45. Welcome back, everyone. A new supreme leader has been chosen to lead the country of Iran after an attack directed by the U.S. and Israel killed the country's former leader.
He's the son of the previous ruler, and President Trump has called him a lightweight, saying that he would not support someone who continued policies of the past. Joining us now live to talk about the latest international developments is Dr. Navin Bobbitt, professor in international relations and the chair of the Department of Political Science at UNC Chapel Hill. Friend of the show now. Dr. Bobbitt, thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you.
All right, so let's just dive right in here. Who is Mojtaba Khamenei, also known as the Shadow Prince, and what has been the reaction so far?
So Khamenei is the son of the previous Ayatollah. He is known for more hardline beliefs, probably a little bit more than his father. His background is that he was born 10 years before the revolution. He joined the IRGC, which is the Iran Revolutionary Guard Council or Corps. He joined that in 1987. He fought against the Iraqis during the Iran-Iraq War. And so he's also toward the end of the 2000s led the Basij. So he is a hardliner. He is known also for his support of a former Iranian president, Ahmadinejad, who was known to the United States as being someone that supported anti-American activity during the Iraq War. So in the result of supporting Ahmadinejad, he was also known as someone that may have helped sort of engineer some elections. So he is not this is a hardline leader. This isn't an improvement necessarily. I suppose maybe it could have been worse, but again, he is more hardline than his father. And I think what this signals is basically the regime is going to found someone that was going to continue his father's policies, that was basically going to continue being not willing to work with the United States or Israel or try to get to a negotiated settlement. This is an act of more an effort to defy both states and to resist what they're doing.
And Navin, it's clear the Iranian people did not choose him, right? He was appointed. This is the first time this has passed from a father to a son since 1979. So what does this tell you when the Iranian people didn't choose him? They don't want him. Clearly, the president says he's unacceptable. Israel's already threatened, whoever's next in line, we're coming to get you. So what kind of target does that put on anyone's back who takes this next position?
I think a big one, or both. Israel has, so the president indicated that he's not an acceptable choice, and that President Trump said that he wanted someone that he could work with or that he would choose. So one of those things may be true. And the Israelis indicated that they would target him immediately. So almost certainly right now he is going to be targeted by for some form of selective strike, at least by the Israelis for sure. So it's worth noting that his spouse was killed on February 28th in a U.S.-Israeli airstrike as well. So his family has come under strain, both his father and his spouse. So it stands to reason that the Israelis would try to target him next, as with the U.S.
Navin, what can we expect from this leadership in the coming days and weeks? Obviously, you mentioned much more hardline than the previous supreme leader. But what can we expect in terms of response, even though Iran is already saying that we are going to fight back against the U.S. and Israel?
I think you'll expect not much of a change from Iran. I mean, what you'd expect is more of an effort to try to. So as far as attacks against Iran's neighbors, those probably will not stop. Though strategically, there may be an incentive to sort of hold off all of the weapons that Iran has until their hope, perhaps, is that the U.S. will run out of missile defenses, and so then they'll be able to use them with more frequency. But I don't think you'll see much of a change in terms of attitude towards neighbors, attitude towards the Iranian people. Again, this was not a popular regime. This individual is probably not going to be very popular either, and also it adds to this negative perception that the theocracy is basically acting in the same way that the previous monarchy would, where you pass something down from father to son. There always were these real concerns about that, about appearing like a monarchy. So I don't think he's likely to be a popular leader. I think what he's likely to do is to provide more resistance to what the United States and Israel are trying to do.
Navin, one quick question. The president is saying, I want to see ships sailing back in the Strait of Hormuz again. We've taken down their Navy, sunk it. We've taken care of the air defense. We've disabled about 80–90% of their missile capabilities. And so the president is saying, it's safe now. Get back to shipping. We want gas prices to come back down. What do you think if you're a boat or a ship captain, the courage it must take to be the first boat to try to start sailing through there again?
It's a big gamble for sure. And I would imagine there's an incentive to be first mover because if you're able to do that, you're able to get stuff out of there. That's a beneficial to your company, but it's a very dangerous spot in the Strait of Hormuz right now. So even if you had boat captains that are willing to do it, you also have to add insurance rates into this because those have gone through the roof, obviously, because of the conflict. So the price of moving product from the Strait of Hormuz is actually quite expensive now. So is it even in the strategic interest of firms to do this until things calm down? That's another question. So, I mean, that's another thing to think about is that it's not just the bravery, although certainly someone will probably do that. It's also the insurance rates that are going to be very high, which are going to diminish since the profit margins of these companies that are trying to move this stuff. So all that's to say is that we're probably in for some more difficult times in the near term.
All right, Dr. Nathan Boppet, professor in international relations at UNC Chapel Hill. Thank you so much for not going far. We told you we were going to continue to bring you on. So thank you so much for your insight this morning.
Thank you.
Queen City News Plus. Just search Queen City News on your smart TV's app store.